As I start to look back in NBA history, I start to notice a lot of things about a lot of players, and how a lot of players are just not given the props for what they've accomplished in their entire career, and some players, just because they put up numbers and they're flashy, they get more credit, and a lot of people think that they deserve more accolades than other players. But today in this video, we are here to talk about the other side of the scenario, which is the players that don't get credit when they really accomplished more than numerous players who are getting more credit. And today that leads into the player we're going to talk about, which is Sidney Moncrief. But before we start this video, I want you guys to go in your app store and download the app SeatGeek, because SeatGeek is an app that takes ticket prices from all over the web and puts them in one place, which makes buying tickets easy. You can also view your tickets from the app. It lets you show where you're going to sit. They score every ticket from 1 to 10 to make sure you're getting the best deal. And if you're not convinced into downloading the app, make sure you click on the link in the description and enter the promo code MUSTARD for $20 off on your first purchase. Trust me, these will be great tickets. Now back to the situation at hand, I would like to say this. Sidney Moncrief is one of the greatest players that the NBA has ever seen at the two-guard position, because I know he isn't a top 50 player or anything like that, and offensively he really wasn't great, but I think that we can all come to the conclusion that Sidney Moncrief definitely paved the way for a lot of players such as Gary Payton, even Tony Allen to this day, and yes, even Michael Jordan. Now let's start off with this. Sidney Moncrief was a player that was drafted in 1979 as the 5th overall pick and was selected by the Milwaukee Bucks. During his career, he played basically his whole entire season with them, as from 1979 to 1990 he played with the Milwaukee Bucks. But in his last year, we're going to just forget that he played with the Hawks, because that was atrocious. He should have retired with the Bucks. But at the end of the day, Sidney Moncrief, he was a phenomenal defensive player, like I said before. His accolades include he was a 5-time All-Star, he was a 5-time All-NBA selection player, also a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 4-time All-Defensive First Team, and a 1-time All-Defensive Second Team. And his jersey is retired by the Milwaukee Bucks. But the thing about Sidney Moncrief that I think a lot of people sleep on is, yes, I said his offensive ability wasn't anything great or flashy, but he was still a really solid offensive player, because throughout his whole entire NBA career, he averaged around 16 points per game, also 4 to 5 rebounds, also averaging around 4 assists while shooting 83% from the free throw line and 50% from the field. Yes, throughout his whole entire career, he shot 50% from the field. In the postseason, those numbers actually are still consistent, as he averaged 16 points, 3 rebounds, as well as 5 assists, while shooting around 47 to 48% from the field and 81% from the free throw line. Now, one of the greatest things about Sidney Moncrief is just, well, his defense, because we're going to just hop right into it. Sidney Moncrief was a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, back-to-back seasons when the award was just created in 1983, and he won it again in 1984, and he made 5 All-NBA defensive teams, won the All-NBA Defensive Second Team in 1982, and for 4 years in a row, from 1983 to 1986, he was an All-NBA First Team. He's clearly one of the greatest players, a top 5 player in Milwaukee Bucks history, and that says a lot with players like Kareem and Oscar Robertson. So when it comes to Sidney Moncrief, I think we can all agree that he's one of the greatest players on the defensive side of the ball, and one of the greatest players at the 2 position, and last but not least, one of the greatest players in Milwaukee Bucks history. Now honestly, when it comes to Sidney Moncrief being underrated, I think what people sleep on is the fact that he was able to consistently lead the Milwaukee Bucks deep into the playoffs. For multiple seasons, he was able to get them to at least the conference semifinals and the conference finals. Now, one of the things that make people not really talk about him is that, 1, he doesn't have a championship, and 2, even worse, he doesn't even have a finals appearance. But when you look at what he's done for the Milwaukee Bucks organization, I don't think anyone thought he would be able to lead them to the finals, as when you think about it, after Kareem left, the Milwaukee Bucks were just looking for some type of spark, and Sidney Moncrief was that guy. When Kareem Abdul-Jabbar left the Milwaukee Bucks from 1982 all the way down to 1986, Sidney Moncrief was a monster on the offensive side and the defensive side of the ball. During that 5-year time window, he averaged 21 points, just around 5 assists and 6 rebounds, as well as around 2 steals, while shooting 50% from the field, as well as around 83 to 84% from the free throw line. So it's clear, at least in my eyes, that Sidney Moncrief, he was a great scorer during his time period. I'm not saying he was elite, but he was a great scorer. I mean, shooting 50% from the field on a winning team that's going deep into the playoffs at points in time, and as well as putting up, good efficiency. That's pretty good. That's a great score. And I think a lot of people do sleep on his scoring ability during his career. And when you look at the fact that on the defensive side of the ball, he did impact a lot of great players. Now, the best example of this has to be in the 1985 playoffs when they matched up against the Chicago Bulls, and he played none other than the great one himself, Michael Jordan. Because in that series, they beat them 3-1, as you only need 3 games to win at that period of time. And he did a really good job on Michael Jordan. Though Michael Jordan did average around 29 points per game, he did not shoot that efficiently, as he shot around 43% from the field. And in Game 1 and the elimination game in Game 4, Michael Jordan only had himself to blame, as Sidney Moncrief did a really solid job on him, as in Game 1, Michael Jordan did have 23 points, as well as 3 steals and 10 assists and 4 rebounds, but he did shoot 37% from the field, as Sidney Moncrief did a good job holding him down, and that would be the demise of the Bulls, as they did lose by 9. And in Game 4, which was the closeout game, Michael Jordan had a pretty disappointing outing, as he had 29 points and 5 assists and 7 rebounds, but shot 37% from the field, as well as having 4 turnovers. So when it comes to that stage, Sidney Moncrief showed up on the offensive side and defensive side of the ball. Now that we're done assessing how great he was on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, let's look at his best season, which in my opinion has to be the 1985 NBA season. Because in the 1985 NBA season, Sidney Moncrief was phenomenal, because that year he averaged around 22 points, 5 assists and 5 rebounds, while shooting 48% from the field and 83% from the free throw line. And in the playoffs, those numbers did not go down. Now, before I even discuss about what happened in the playoffs, I think it's safe to say that I should talk about what happened in the regular season. Because in the regular season, those were not the best of his averages. Because I think what makes this season better than a lot of the other seasons, where he did put up even better numbers and sometimes even less minutes, but what makes this season stand out more is that he was the clear #1 option on a championship contending team, as the Milwaukee Bucks in that season managed to nearly win 60 games, and they went 59-23, and they were second in the Eastern Conference. Because in my honest, humble opinion, Sidney Moncrief showed how great of a leader he was that season, because he was just outstanding and phenomenal. And I know they had other great players that year, such as Presley. Also, they had Craig Hodges. Terry Cummings was a really solid player, and I mean, they had some solid pieces on that roster, but Sidney Moncrief was clearly the best player. He was the best two-way player on that team in the league, matter of fact, and he showed it that season. And then in the playoffs, that work did not stop, because in the first series, like I talked about, he did a great job on Michael Jordan, but on the offensive side of the ball, I never talked about it, did I? Because on the offensive side of the ball against the Chicago Bulls, while being guarded by Michael Jordan, he averaged around 27 points per game, 5 assists and just under 5 rebounds, while shooting 55% from the field and 92% from the free throw line. Now, I know it is a rookie Michael Jordan, but at the end of the day, those are still phenomenal numbers. And honestly, those numbers could have been better, because in the last game, the elimination game, he did not play the greatest basketball. He did shoot below 40% from the field, and it kind of messed up his efficiency. So he could have possibly shot around 60-something% on Michael Jordan during that entire series. But in the next series, I know he was swept by the Philadelphia 76ers, but honestly, I don't blame that on him. I blame that on the inconsistencies of Paul Presley, Terry Cummings, at times Craig Hodges as well. So I don't necessarily blame that on him, because there was only one bad game he had, and that was in game 3, where he shot below 40% from the field, but he still did manage to get 6 assists and 7 rebounds and didn't turn it over as much. He only had 2 turnovers. So In that perspective, I've kind of got to give him props, and he did hit all of his free throws, all 8 of them. So offensively, he did not shoot that well from the field, but in other aspects, he was impacting the game, and we all know defensively he's elite. But in the other games and throughout the whole series, he was fantastic, especially offensively, not just defensively, but offensively. He looked like a superstar, because throughout that whole entire series against Philly, he averaged just around 19.5 points per game, 5 assists and 4 rebounds, as well as a steal, while shooting 56% from the field, 40% from 3, and around 96% from the free throw line. So it's clear, at least in my eyes, that Sidney Moncrief was not the detriment of that Milwaukee Bucks team, as they got swept by Philly. Now, the most important and the final thing that I want to talk about in his career is the accomplishments, because when you look at what he was able to accomplish in his career, though I did read it in the beginning, it has to be an anomaly. Now, what I mean by that is that Sidney Moncrief is the only guard in NBA history to win Defensive Player of the Year twice, and he did it back-to-back seasons. And what I find so great about that is that Sidney Moncrief, when you look at Michael Jordan, some people would even sit down and tell you that Jordan is the greatest defender that is a guard. But that is false, because when you look at someone such as Sidney Moncrief, who paved the way for someone like Jordan, and paved the way for someone like Gary Payton, and paved the way for players such as Tony Allen, and even Kawhi Leonard if you want to throw him in there, because when you include the forwards, only Kawhi Leonard and Sidney Moncrief are the only guards and forwards and, basically perimeter players to win Defensive Player of the Year multiple times. And I think that is one of the most slept on things about Sidney Moncrief. And what's such a travesty here is that he has still yet not been inducted into the Hall of Fame. That is a shame, and that is a joke, because when you look at players such as Reggie Miller and Tracy McGrady, there is no excuse for them making the Hall of Fame over players such as Sidney Moncrief, who have more accomplishments to their name, put up better numbers, and honestly, what have they done that those players have not? Because when you look at someone like Reggie Miller and also Tracy McGrady, because I understand people are going to say Reggie Miller has the finals appearance, but what about T-Mac? T-Mac for years struggled to get out of the first round, but Sidney Moncrief was at least able to get to the conference finals. And Sidney Moncrief is at least the best at something, because he's clearly the best defender at the 2 guard position, actually at the guard position, matter of fact, and T-Mac isn't the best at anything. A lot of people say injuries did derail his career, but look at what he did rather than what he could have done. And when you look at Reggie Miller, there is no doubt, at least in my mind, that Sidney Moncrief is better than Reggie Miller. He is a better shooting guard than Reggie Miller. He's a better player than Reggie Miller. He's just better overall than Reggie Miller, and he's accomplished more than Reggie Miller. Reggie Miller arguably wasn't even top 3 at his own position. Meanwhile, Sidney Moncrief was the best at his position at the time, as well as being the best defender in the league. And I know it is arguable if he was the best at his position, but that's a topic for another day. But in conclusion, Sidney Moncrief should be an inductee in the Hall of Fame, and every second that passes by that he's not is a disgrace to the NBA and to the game of basketball. So wrapping this video up, if you agreed with me, let me know down below in the comment section. Also, you guys make sure you like this video. I want to get at least, around 500 likes, so make sure you hit that like button. Also, hit the bell next to my name if you are subbed, and if you're not, subscribe right now and hit the bell. As a matter of fact, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and add me on Snapchat. Especially follow me on Twitter. That link will be down below. Now, without further ado, this is your boy Young Mustard signing out. Peace.